This video is sponsored by Autonomous. Hey everyone, a lot of y'all really enjoyed my Mega Backdoor Roth IRA video. And to continue on with the series for post-grad finances, today we'll be covering options trading, but just two ways of doing them, and they're relatively safe compared to the other ones, so let's get started. First things first, in order to do options trading, you most likely need to enable options on your brokerage account. So if you're on Fidelity, TD, Charles Schwab, Robinhood, there will be an easy way for you just to access your current trading levels and usually just apply to upgrade so that you have options too. When I was doing it for Robinhood, literally I applied, got an email like 10 seconds later saying I got approved. So not too hard, but just make sure you do it or else you won't be able to see options trading as an option. So a quick overview about options if you're not familiar. First things first, with options you're trading contracts. And what is a contract? A contract is either to buy or sell 100 shares of a stock. So if I'm saying I'm selling one contract, that means I'm selling 100 shares. And if people are saying I'm trading, like 10 contracts, that means they're trading 1,000 shares of a stock. And basically you're betting on whether or not the stock price is going to increase or decrease within a given amount of time. A lot of people like to do options because it lets them leverage cash that they might not have. If you buy a contract for 100 shares, maybe it's like Tesla, like I said. Normally, most people wouldn't have $70,000 to buy 100 shares of Tesla. So instead of that, they just buy an option which equals 100 shares of Tesla, but won't cost as much. And I'll explain how the prices of these options work. And finally, of course, with options, there are risky plays you can make and also more relatively safe plays you can make. In today's video, I'll be covering the more safe stuff to do, which are covered calls and cash secured puts. So covered calls, also known as CCs, if you ever read on like Reddit forums or things like that. And the concept is that you're selling a contract which allows someone to buy 100 shares of your stock at a certain price if it hits this price by this date. And the person buying this right to buy your shares pays you a premium, which is how you make money. So for example, let's say you have 100 shares of Uber and currently it's at $45 and someone is willing to pay you $1 per share to buy 100 of your shares for $50 by the end of the month. So you might be thinking, why would someone do this? This is because people buying this contract from you think that Uber will hit a way higher price by the end of the month if Uber's price exceeds that of the premium they paid, which is $1, and the price they bought it at, which is $50, so $51. If Uber is greater than $51 at the end of the month, then whoever bought that contract from you profits. Whereas for you, if the price does not hit $50 by the end of the month, then you don't have to sell, they cannot buy your shares. So you just made a quick $100 and also keep your Uber shares. And if you want to play it safe, you don't want to sell your shares, you just want to keep collecting premiums. The easiest way to do this is to set a purchase price for those shares at a way higher price than the current share price of that stock. However, people aren't dumb, so the higher the price is from the current price, the less premium buyers are willing to play because it's less likely to happen. Same thing as if you set the date for when the contract expires. If it's way in the future, people are willing to pay more high premiums because there's more time for that stock to increase in price. Whereas let's say I'm setting the price to something really high next week, the chances of that is super low, so people aren't willing to pay that much of a premium. So to collect the highest premium, you would want to set a price that's closest to the current price of the stock at a further date. Whereas if you want to collect a much lower premium that's much more safe, you would set a price that's decently higher than the current price and a little bit more in the future. So when would you want to do covered calls? Typically, you want to do this for stocks that you already own a lot of shares of, at least 100, because you need 100 to write one contract. And you really don't mind selling your stock at a certain price because let's say you already made profit at that price. You bought these shares at a much lower price in the past, you've been holding on for a while, you've already got the long-term gains tax on it, and you don't mind selling it at any point. And if you're going to sell at a price, why not just collect some premiums too while you're at it? So you can do this for stocks that you don't mind selling, and you can play it safe, sell covered calls at prices that are not as likely to hit by certain dates, collect little premiums every 2 weeks or so, and eventually maybe 1 week that price does hit. You sell your stock at a profit and you can collecting all these premiums along the way. And with covered calls, the worst case is that you make less money than you could have. You never lose money because you're selling the stock at a certain price. The only reason why you would make less money is that suddenly the stock goes to the moon, it increases a lot in price and you just missed out. Which can happen in some cases like AMC or GameStop, but very rare. And yeah, so you don't lose money, you just make less money. For example, let's say you bought a stock for $100, you have 100 shares of that, and you're willing to sell it for $120 because you'll be making $20 per share. But instead, you want to keep selling covered calls, so you're selling these covered calls at $120 every 2 weeks. And let's say it's going on for a while, it never hit 120 and you're making this money, but 1 week the stock price jumps up to 130 and you're forced to sell your shares at $120 each. So you're still making making $20 profit per share, but you could have been making $30 per share since the price is now $130, but you never really would have guessed that to happen, and you've also collected premium along the way, so you're just making less money, but you're still making money. And on the flip case, maybe you do end up selling it at $120, but the stock goes back down to like $100 the next week. You're happy to sell it, right? So you never know, but with covered calls, you're guaranteed to make money with the premiums you make from selling the contracts. And if you're really worried, you can actually buy back these covered calls that you're selling. And this is because the price of the contract deviates throughout time, because as the current date gets closer to the expiration date of the contract, if the price isn't anywhere near the purchase price that the contract holds, the contract's premium will be really low because it's really unlikely to happen. Whereas maybe a month ago when you sold the contract originally, people thought, oh, the price can't be hit and they're willing to pay $1 for it. But now, let's say it's 2 days before the expiration hits and the contract's only 5 cents. You can just pay 5 cents to close your contract, which is buying it back, and you'll be making 95 cents profit per share with your covered call. This is just in case, maybe someday, one day before the contract, maybe something like an earnings report happens and the stock's only soars. This way you can prevent that from happening. And typically for covered calls, you can kind of get like maybe 2 to 3% return per call if you set it correctly. And theoretically, if you're selling these covered calls weekly, that give you a premium of 2% to 3% return, then if you do it for 52 weeks, this is just hypothetically, if your contract never gets exercised, then that's 104 to 156% returns each year, which is really nice. Now let's cover cash secured puts, also known as CSPs. It's kind of the opposite of a covered call, where in a covered call, you're leveraging the stocks you share, like 100 shares per contract. In this case, for CSPs, you're leveraging cash you have. And how do they work? With a cash secured put, you're selling someone the right to sell you 100 shares of a stock at a certain price by this date. And the person buying this right from you is paying you a premium. So for example, let's say you have $4,000, Uber's stock price is currently $45, and you sell a cash secured put, which allows someone to sell you 100 shares of Uber for $40 by this given date. And this person is paying you $1 per share for this. The reason why someone would buy this contract from you is that they think Uber's stock is going to be way below $40 by the end of the month. If Uber gets below $39, which is the price of Uber at that point, and the $1 per share they pay you for premium, if it's below that $39, then the person who bought the contract from you makes profit because they're selling you Uber for $39, but maybe Uber's only $30 right now at the given time. So they're basically shorting it. So for example, if Uber's $35, this person is making $4 profit per share off of you. Whereas in your case, if Uber's price doesn't hit below $40 by the given date, then you collect that premium, which is $100 because it's $1 per share times 100 shares, and you don't have to buy any Uber stock. So just like for covered calls, the closer the purchase price you have to the current price of the stock, the higher the premium someone will pay you, and the further the date from the current date, the higher the premium someone will pay you too, because there's more time for that stock price to fall. So when is it ideal to sell cash secured puts? Typically what's best is, let's say you're already interested in purchasing a stock for this price. For example, let's say Airbnb is $150 right now, and I don't mind buying 100 shares for $140 each because I think it's a good deal. Instead of just setting a limit order where I say once Airbnb hits $140, I buy 100 shares, why not sell a cash secured put where if it does hit $140, I buy 100 shares, but I can also make a premium off of the person who buys the contract off of me. So this way I make extra money. Let's say the CSP gives you $2 per share, then you're effectively getting Airbnb for $138 per share instead. The worst case when it comes to CSPs is when the stock plummets dramatically and you're buying these shares at a price much more higher than it is now. So let's say you bought Airbnb for $140, right now it's $100. You're losing $40 per share. So obviously you want to do CSPs with more safer stocks with a pretty narrow range of what's the lowest and highest price point it has been in the past year. Like I said, it's best to sell these CSPs for stocks you wouldn't already mind buying. And similar to covered calls, you can also buy back your CSPs. So let's say you also sold this contract for $1 per share. It's 2 days before the contract expires and the price of Airbnb is nowhere near $140. Let's say it's still like $155, maybe it increased in the past week. Then that CSP is probably going to be worth like 10 cents per share. Buy it back and you make a net 90 cents per share profit. And before we continue, I'd like to thank Autonomous for sponsoring today's video. So if you're like me and like to have a nice work from home setup, having a nice chair is definitely an essential part of the setup. Autonomous sent me their Ergo Pro chair, and it's honestly the best chair I've ever sat on. The chair, seat, and back is made of a nice mesh material, which is really smooth to sit and lean back on. And the build quality of this chair honestly had me by surprise. I did not expect it to be such high quality. As we can see here, the armrests are fully adjustable. You can spread them out or spread them in depending how wide your shoulders are. You can also lift your armrest up and down. Another really cool feature I like about the chair is that the back is fully functional and flexible. So if you lean back, the chair adjusts to your pressure and it feels very natural. It's not like you're cranking a gear to switch the incline of your chair. And there's also a gear on the chair that lets you adjust the level to which how much pressure you need to add to recline back on the chair. All in all, I think this is a great chair if you're working from home or if you're looking for a chair for your office. Personally, I think it's worth the price because you're not just investing in a nice chair, you're also investing in your health, the posture in which you sit on, how comfortable you feel. These are all important factors to consider when you get older. So if you're interested in getting an autonomous chair, you can use my referral code, which will be in the description, to get 5% off an autonomous chair. Thank you to Autonomous for sponsoring the video, and let's continue talking about options. So now you know how covered calls work and cash secured puts work. And you might have heard of this thing called the wheel strategy. Well, you actually now know how the wheel strategy works, or you know the two components of it, CCs and CSPs. So wheel strategy is basically just combining the two, and with these two, you're running a wheel. And how it works is that you first sell cash secured puts until you eventually get 100 shares of a stock. And with that 100 shares of a stock, you start selling covered calls on that until you sell your stocks. So you're collecting premium from your cash secured puts until you're forced to purchase that stock because that price hits. And now with that stock, you're collecting premium because you're selling covered calls on those stocks, and eventually you'll have to sell once the price hits for that. And once you finish selling that stock, you've completed the wheel, and you can start going back to selling cash secured puts to start the new wheel. At the very worst case, if you're not selling the stocks for a higher price than when you bought them, you're making money from the premiums you're collecting by these contracts. So for example, let's say I'm selling cash secured puts on Airbnb for $2 each per share, and I do this twice, and on the second time, Airbnb hits 140 and my contract gets exercised. And now I have 100 shares of Airbnb, but I want to sell Airbnb at a higher price than I bought it. Let's say I want to sell it for $150. So I'll be making $10 per share, and I'll be selling covered calls on this price, and let's say I collect $1 per share for these covered calls. So I do this eventually until Airbnb's price goes back up to 150. That's when my contract gets exercised. And let's say maybe I did 3 covered calls, so the first 2 Airbnb never hit 150, but on the third one it did, and I sell my shares. So if I do the math now, if we only look at me purchasing the stock and selling the stock, I've made $1,000 because I sold Airbnb at a $10 higher price than what I purchased it for. So we put that on the side, and now let's look at the money we make from wheeling, which is selling the CSPs and the CCs. So from the CSPs, we sold 2 of them, and for each of them we made $2 per share, so 2 times 100, so $200 per contract, and we had 2 contracts, we made $400. And then once we bought those shares, we started selling covered calls, and we sold 3 of them, and for each of them, we were making $1 per share, so $1 times 100 shares, $100 per contract, 3 contracts, so we made $300. So now, if we include that to how much we made from just selling the shares at a higher price, we made $1,700. So $1,000 was just from, selling at a higher price, and then $700 was through wheeling because we made money from premiums. As we can see, premiums made a huge play into the total amount of profit we've made. So like I said, a lot of times people tell you buy low, sell high. Why not just run the wheel too, where you can make additional money from your premiums? And obviously this only works when it works. Sometimes the stock might not go back up, sometimes the stock stays low, but even when the stock stays low, let's say originally you just bought that stock at that price and now you're losing money because the stock's never going back up for a while, right? Well, if you're already holding the stock, you might as well just keep selling covered calls on it. Even if the stock price doesn't go back up, you can still collect premium every week, every 2 weeks, and you can make back your losses. So that's about it. In today's video, you learned covered calls, cash secured puts, and the wheeling strategy. So you basically know options trading now. Once again, thank you so much to Autonomous for sponsoring today's video. If you're interested in the chair, make sure to use my link down below. Super comfortable. I have a lot of videos planned for this post-grad finance series, but if you have anything you want me to talk about, please let me know down in the comments below. I definitely want to make videos you guys want to see. And if you're interested too, I have some referral links down below for exchanges where you can get free stocks, free crypto. So make sure to check those out. And yeah, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you for the next video. Peace.
Shawty, I know you gon' hate me. I'm finna whip a Mercedes, bet I be driving you crazy. Got that shit out of the gutter, did it for me and my brothers. Loving the way that you hate me, baby, it's feeling amazing.